This looks a little bit more complicated than what we did yesterday, yes?
Yes.
So still same steps. What I wrote out yesterday is the first thing you want to do is find f of x plus h. That's what we're going to do first. It's just going to be a little bit more complicated because this is a bigger problem. So that literally means take x plus h and plug it in for every x that we saw. There's 2 x's in this problem, so make sure it gets plugged in for both of them. So it's going to be x plus h squared minus 7 times x plus h plus 3. Then we have to simplify that. Now, in number 2 that we did yesterday, we squared this already, didn't we? When you square a binomial, you get a trinomial. It's going to be x squared plus, this is where we had a little debate yesterday, is what happens when we do the middle part. The middle part is x times h times 2, so it's going to be 2hx plus h squared. Or again, if you want to write it twice and FOIL it together, you can do it that way. X plus h times x plus h. FOIL it together on the side, maybe do a little scratch work, then write it in. Then the next thing I have to do here is distribute that negative 7. It's going to be negative 7x minus 7h plus 3. And then be careful, none of those are like terms. None of those can be combined. We have an x squared, an h squared, we have an x with an h, we have an x by itself, we have an h by itself. You can't combine any of those. So you're just going to write that all down as the very first part of the difference quotient. This is the first thing I'm plugging into the difference quotient. That's that first part. F of x plus h. Then it's going to be minus, it's always minus. The second part says I have to plug in f of x, so that's that original part up there. Again, when you do the minus, you need to put that part in parentheses so that you subtract properly. So minus that f of x in parentheses. That's what I plugged in here. Plug that in. All over h. What did we talk about yesterday with that minus sign? What do you have to do with that minus sign? You have to distribute it, yes? All of these change. So this is going to be minus, this is going to be plus, this is going to be minus. And now do you see anything that cancels out? X squared cancels with the negative x squared that we just made. Negative 7x cancels with positive 7x. Do you see how that distributing the minus is changing those so that they cancel? They should cancel out. So all this end stuff, that's kind of the process here. All that end stuff, once you distribute the negative, you have to remember to do that part. You have to remember your parentheses. You have to remember to distribute the negative. Once you do that, all of those things at the end are going to cancel with something in the front. Now I'm going to write down what we have left. We have 2hx plus h squared minus 7h. That's all that's left on the top now. It was really long for a minute, but a lot of things canceled out. All over h. Then my suggestion from here is don't try and cancel yet. You need to take it out before you try and cancel it. Get it unattached. They're all those h's are attached to something right now. We don't want to cancel it out until it's not attached to something. So to get it unattached, we're going to take the h out of it. So if I take the h out of the top, 2x is left with the first term, bless you, plus h is left with the second term, and then the third term is just minus 7. All over h. Now you can cancel them. Now that you got it unattached, that h outside is no longer attached. Plus and minus signs are really strong bonds in math. You can't just break things away from a plus or minus sign, but if you can factor it out and turn it into a multiplication problem, that's a less strong bond. You can actually unattach the h now. You can cancel it out. So your answer is just 2x plus h minus 7. Good? Are we feeling a little bit better about this? I know that's a lot of work, but it's just plugging in and simplifying stuff. Plugging in and seeing what cancels.
So with that negative sign.
So this is an introduction into what are called piecewise functions. You guys, when you get to calculus, are going to do a lot more with piecewise functions. A piecewise function is a function that is defined by 2 or more functions over specific domains. So instead of just having one function, it's going to be split based on a range of values for x, which function you're going to refer to. So the idea here is we're still going to be plugging in, because if you look at number 1, it says we want to find f of negative 6. The difference is you have to decide which function you're going to plug into based on the value for x. So when you look at this first value here, it's negative 6. The relationship they're asking you for right now, if you look at the two if parts of the piecewise function, we want to know if x is either less than 6 or greater, or less than 0, or greater than or equal to 0. So when we look at negative 6 is, negative 6 is less than 0. So does that make sense that we're actually going to be using this top function here?
Yes.
So if the value comes out for this particular piecewise function, if it says if it's less than 0, we have to plug it into the top function. So all you're going to do is what we practiced yesterday, is plug it in. It's going to be negative 6 squared plus 3. You're plugging it into that function because that's the one that it falls into the range for. The functions are going to change.
Oh.
So you just have to pay attention to which one do I have to plug into based on what that function is asking for. So this first answer is 39? Agreed? Looking at number 2, we want to find f of 5. Is 5 less than 0 or greater than or equal to 0?
Greater than
5 is greater than or equal to 0. So that means we're plugging it into the bottom function because that's the one that it says it can go into. It can only go into that function if x is greater than or equal to 0. That's what that means. We're using the bottom function anytime x is bigger than or equal to 0. So we're using the bottom function this time because we have a positive number. So it's going to be 5 times 5 plus 3. That's going to be 25 plus 3, which is 28. Can we take a minute and try 3 and 4? Here's what those answers should look like. I didn't record myself doing them. But take a look. I color-coded it. Figure it out. Sorry.